Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to our fifth session. We have just one more to go before it's all over, before the fun is all over. It's really great seeing so many of you on with us this afternoon. And because I have quite a lot of exciting things to share with you this afternoon, I will head right in. The usual, you can catch us on Facebook if you want to go and review this session and the others as well. Use the chats as much as possible on Facebook and on Zoom to share your comments, any questions you have, ideas, and so on. Hopefully, we will have some time for you to share any share out orally at the end of the session. And remember, this is a safe space with no judgment, no blame. There will be opportunities for additional reading. And I would really like that you, as we go through the session, if anything, just catches your attention, make a note of it so that you can, maybe do a little more reading on it specifically. Now, everything that I'm going to talk about in this session can be explored for hours and hours. So make a note of whatever catches your attention. You will get some additional information online. It's freely available. I will need to move quickly because of the time factor, but there are some points that I want to share just to lay a foundation because, we need to work on our minds before we start designing our actions in the classroom. So what do we want to start with? Because our session is really about tracking our students' writing progress, we want to start with how do we know what students can do? And clearly, for us to know what it is they can do, we have to get them to write. We have to get them to write. We have to get them to prepare different types of writing. Now, in our very first session, we looked at the different types of texts that are available both in and out of school. You want to help them explore those different types of texts and write all of those different types of texts. You want to conference with the students regularly. When you conference with them, you will find out what successes they're having, you will find out what challenges they're having, and you will be able to guide them. Remember that word coaching that we saw in a previous session when we were looking at the writing process? You will be able to provide that coaching and you will be able to see what students can do and where they may have some challenges. As you teach writing, you want to make sure that you have a focus, right? That will help you track how students are progressing in that particular area. So at times you may want to be focused on what the students write, the content, how they write it, how they develop their ideas, how they express themselves, whether their vocabulary is expanding, etc. Or you may want to look at the performance, meaning how do they go about writing, go through that writing process? Are they spending enough time doing the editing? Are they doing it effectively, etc.? You want to also keep records, right? Now, your records will differ from person to person. So for some persons, they may want to have very precise records, the students' names and the dates that they're making certain observations and so on. For others, it may just be, they may be more apt to just make quick notes, maybe on, sticky notes, or if you have a notebook that you just want to jot down ideas as you conference, as you walk around, things that pop into your mind and so on. But definitely keep records. You will not be able to use every piece of information that you record, but you definitely have it available there. You can review it at the end of a week, at the end of a day to see what it is you want to do as your next step. You also want to maintain student ownership, right? So one option is to have students decide what you read and what you mark. And that will link really nicely with the idea of portfolios, right? Because you want throughout this process of teaching writing, you want to create that community of writers, you want to create skilled writers, you want to build mastery, you want to build fluency, you want to build writing stamina. You have to do that by giving the students the option of doing something, right? So whether you encourage them to write every day, but then let you know what it is they would like you to read, right? Obviously, you have to decide, and when we get to portfolios, we'll talk about that a bit. You have to decide as a class, how many pieces are we definitely producing, what we really expect from this class, what you must produce at the end of the day. But you can have, because you want students to write as much as possible, you can give them that option where they indicate to you, I've written something, but Miss, I don't really want you to read that. But Miss, can you read this one? Well, I've written a few pieces, but I think this is my best one. And I think, I will get better marks on this one, right? Now, obviously, our next question is, well, what about the students who can't write? So I have put some phrases here for you, and you may have heard of them, or you may have seen them, or you may have even studied them. There's inclusive education. There's our best friend, differentiation, differentiated learning. There's also universal design for learning and backward design. And I will spend a little more time on the last two, talking for a bit. Now, there are some links. Hopefully we can get it in the chat in this session, where you can get a little more information on some of these areas. But really, inclusive education, it really came from special education, right? And seeing how, instead of excluding students with disabilities, whether it's physical or learning disabilities, from the general education classroom, this looks at how to include those students, right? Because the research is showing that when students learn together, they do better. They learn better, they retain better, they perform better, right? And of course, we know that diversity is definitely the spice of life, that variety. And having students with different perspectives. Remember, we mentioned perspectives in a previous session as well, how to get students to see things from different viewpoints. It also teaches things that are non-academic, like empathy, right? Respect for each other, consideration for each other. That's part of our instruction as well, right? Now, for inclusive education, when you design your classroom environment, you design it in a way so that all students can have access to it, whether it's physically or in the learning experience, which means a student who has a visual impairment, right? So, maybe some students are short-sighted or far-sighted, or some students don't see very clearly. What will you do in your instruction to ensure that you address that need that they have? If you know that some students they have attention deficit, they are dyslexic, or they need more time to work, they need to work in a quiet space. All of these practices are ways that you can be inclusive, right? And for each student in your class, you keep focusing on what the student can do and what the student is great at. And that is how the student contributes to the community classroom, right? Now imagine if all of us in the community were rearing pigs, right? Nobody was planting potatoes, nobody was making calls, everybody just rearing pigs. Would that be an effective community? Not so much. Right? So we want to think about what skills, what talents, what contributions each child can make to the classroom, rather than what the students cannot do. Now that's the idea of inclusive education, and you can read a little more on what it is and how to implement it in your class. We also know about differentiated instruction, right? I think we have some general idea, but here are some things that maybe we don't all keep in mind, or we don't really know about differentiated instruction. For the teacher, it really starts with attitude and mindset. So this is not a technique. Differentiated instruction is not a technique that you use and then you don't use it the next day. It's not a strategy. It's an approach. It's a framework. It's a way of thinking, right? The reason or the purpose for differentiated instruction are actually differences. That's the whole reason. That's the reason why we differentiate. If there were no differences, then we wouldn't have to differentiate, right? See the connection there? So we have to acknowledge, accept, enjoy, embrace, celebrate the fact that there are student differences. Now, another idea is that the learning environment that you create must be supportive, and that is very, very important. Now, that learning environment is not necessarily the physical classroom space, but it's when students come into your class, they know that they're welcome there. They know that you enjoy having them there, that you enjoy hearing from them, that you love it when they participate, and that you utterly really do believe that they can and will learn and that they can contribute to the class. That when they're going to make a contribution, you will not tell them, that's not important, right? That you will listen. We're talking about all of these things within bounds, right? But students need to know that when they come into the classroom, they are actually part of the class, right? And they're not an annoyance, you know, they're not a job that you're doing. I mean, it's your job, but they don't feel as if, you know, they're a burden. You want them to feel welcomed in the classroom. And that is what that supportive learning environment is. When students know that you are willing to work with them, they push a lot more. When the students know that you actually like them and you respect them, they push a lot more. And if you've had those experiences, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, DI also tells you that a quality curriculum actually means, a high quality curriculum actually means that there are high expectations for all students. Now, high expectations does not mean we expect every student to perform at this specific level. We're saying that for every student, no matter where they are, we expect them to keep going a little higher, right? We believe that when we design instruction for those students, we're designing it with the confidence that they will be able to meet the expectations that we've designed, all right? In DI, the students and the teachers are also collaborating. Collaborating how? Well, you know, as a teacher, it's your responsibility to say, okay, these are the things students need to know, they need to understand, these are the skills they need to be able to demonstrate and develop, etc. But the students are also collaborating with you by letting you know when something is too hard for them, when it's too easy, when they enjoy the way a particular concept was taught, and what kinds of assessments that they would like to do to show you that they understand and they have developed the skills that you have, right? So your students can help you design instruction. We're not saying they're deciding what it is they're going to learn, but they can help you decide how it is they're going to explore those topics. Now, this here is a very nice visual of what differentiated instruction is, right? Now, we know the parts with, you know, how teachers can differentiate. You know, they can differentiate the content, the process, the product, or the environment, and they can do that by readiness, interest, and learning profile. Now, if this is not something that you're familiar with, I would suggest you really do some reading on it, because it's a wonderful opportunity to understand the different characteristics of students in the class and how you can address each of them. Now, this is a really good text, right? This is on Amazon. I think this one is about maybe $40, I think, right? This is written by Caroline Tomlinson, of course, you know, who's like the auntie of differentiated instruction, right? It has really nice information. Now, what I would suggest, you know, if you and some other peers at your school, you're really interested in these kinds of texts, you know, maybe you can form a little literacy book club in your school, and each of you buy a different text, you know, you read, you share, and you discuss, because there are some really great points in here. Just like the other text I showed you on the writing workshop, this is another great one. Now, the other one I want to talk about, there's this other text, which is integrating differentiated instruction and understanding by design. Now, this was written by Caroline Tomlinson and Jay McTighe. Now, he has been explaining what understanding by design is, and this text shows how you can integrate the two very, very seamlessly. Now, what is this whole understanding by design about? Well, it's really about the way that we plan our instruction and how that can help us track students' understanding. Normally, this is how we normally plan, right? We may either start with a topic, and we focus a lot on the activities that we're going to do for that topic. We focus on how we're going to teach the students. There's usually one major assessment at the end that we might call, you know, our culminating assessment, or our culminating activity that's going to tell us, yes, the students know this, or no, they don't know this. Generally, when we teach students, we tell them, okay, this is what we're going to do for this lesson. Right now, this is what we've been doing. But understanding by design gives us a different way to look at things. Now, the origin of this concept, I think I actually removed some important notes there, but I will upload it in the shared folder. The origin of understanding by design was actually from engineering, for persons who were creating physical spaces, right? And the idea was, when you create a physical space, you think of every possible person accessing that space, someone who may be in a wheelchair, someone who may be visually impaired, someone who may be hearing impaired, etc. How do you create an environment where everybody can access this particular space? And the same thing is applied to learning. How do we create learning experiences that all of the students can access? So in understanding by design, the focus is on the end goal rather than on the activities that you're going to do. The focus is on learning and understanding, right? Not just knowledge, not just knowing, but learning and understanding. It emphasizes that there should be a variety of assessments that will together tell you what students know, understand, and are able to do. And when we're sharing with students, we're setting them up for the learning experience, we want to tell them what we'll be able to understand or be able to do by the end of this unit are A, B, C, D, right? So you notice in this instance, the focus, we're starting with the end, right? We start with the end in mind. And this is actually called backward design. Now it has 3 stages. And again, do some additional reading if this sounds interesting to you. Normally, like I said, when we're planning our lesson, we may start with, like a topic, or we may start with some activities and so on. This is really for planning units. What we do at the beginning of our planning session is start with the standards, right? The standards usually tell us, they tell us what students should be able to do. The performance standards that we have, especially at the primary level. At the secondary level, our syllabus will tell us what the standards are for the subject area. What are students supposed to be able to do? We start with those. We say, okay, so every student should be able to demonstrate the skill of persuasion. Great. The next thing we do now is, now we can break that down. We can break that down into, okay, so for them to be able to do that, what do they need to know? What do they need to understand? And what skills would they need to develop, right? The next thing you do is determine what your assessments will be that will help students demonstrate that skill or that understanding. So if the end goal is to be persuasive, then what can students do to demonstrate that persuasive ability, right? They can write a speech, they can present a speech, they can create an advertisement, they can engage in a debate, right? They can do a dramatic piece that involves persuading or convincing. So already you see that there are so many things that they can do that involves speaking, acting, writing, etc., right? Then, now that you have those things outlined, now you start designing activities that will help them get to the point where they can do those things. Now, if we've already decided that these are the evidences that students have that ability, it means we now have to say, okay, for students to be able to write a speech, for students to be able to deliver a speech, for them to be able to create an advertisement, for them to be able to dramatize, what are the activities I would now need to do with them so that they can get to that point? And so that students can do any of the above. Then you start designing the learning experiences, all right? Now, you see a few notes on the side here. So we're saying start with the end in mind. The next step, plan for what the most and least skilled students in your class can do, and then create a continuum in between. So say, okay, my most advanced student will be able to, let's say, deliver a speech, because they'd have to write the speech, practice it, then deliver it. So let's say for you, that's the most complex thing. Then maybe you want to say maybe the least complex would be something that involves speaking, where they maybe don't have to write. Then how can you create a continuum of activities in between what that most skilled and least skilled student can do? And then as you're planning the learning experiences, you differentiate. Now remember, you can differentiate the content, the product, the process, the environment, and you can do all of these based on students' interest, students' readiness level, and students' learning profiles, right? So you see how many options you have there? All you have to do is provide the students with options. That's the easiest way to differentiate, right? It means that when you're planning, you cannot be over specific. You have to focus on what the big goal is and then ask, what are some ways you can achieve that big goal? All right. I want to be a good swimmer. Then I can do several things. I can go and learn on my own, or I can get a coach. I can practice every single day, or I can go to lessons 3 times for the week. You have options, right? Maybe I don't want to learn the backstroke. I want to learn the breaststroke, or maybe I just want to learn to float, right? And I'll consider myself good enough. You give the students options so that they can show what it is they can do. Because remember, that's what your aim is. Your aim is for them to demonstrate to you that they know and understand and can perform, right? This is an example of the unit template that you would use to plan. Now, it's very, very similar to the unit template that was shared with you at the primary level when we were discussing and presenting the learning standards. Remember that wonderful experience? Right, now you will see on the side here, you are establishing the goals, the understandings, and the skills that the students will be able to demonstrate. I love this area about transfer, because when you are doing these things, you are being very systematic. That's why it's called learning by design. You actually plan for the students to learn. You don't plan to teach, you plan for the students to learn, which means you have to start with the students at the end. How will the students transfer whatever they learn in this unit to other units, to other subject areas, to life outside of the classroom, right? Essential questions, we know we also call them focusing questions. All of these are part of the experience, of the planning as well. Now, again, this is very, very involved. We can have, a series of sessions just talking about understanding by design and differentiated instruction. So if that is something that's catching your eye already, and you think that's an interesting way of planning and being more systematic in your planning, check it out. Check it out and see if it's something that you would like to do. So let's talk about portfolios for a bit, right? What's the purpose of a portfolio? It's really to demonstrate improvement and achievements, right? There's a collection of students' writing pieces. It's in one place. The teacher can take a look at it and see how the students are progressing over time. The students themselves can reflect on their work, measure their own progress. What is the effect of that? They are able to improve their own writing, all right? So the portfolio allows for student ownership. They decide how many pieces go into the portfolio, and they can even decide which of their pieces make the final cut. Now, as a class, you will discuss how many pieces should go in there. You say at the end of this period of time, you need to have 3 different types of writing. One should be a narrative or a story. The other should be a persuasive. The other should be an informational text, right? They choose which of these pieces they're going to include in their portfolio. They also understand that they have to demonstrate their writing progress in that piece. They have to go through that recursive writing process. They have to be very thoughtful and mindful about how they're developing their text, because they know that they have to include their plan, their drafts, any revisions that they make, and their final pieces, right? But that's a discussion that you will have in the class with your students as you designing that portfolio. The information in that portfolio is important and very useful to students, to teacher, to parents or caregivers. The students will see their own progress and they will learn to self-evaluate. The teachers or you, as you pick up those portfolios, you can give specific targeted feedback to each student based on the information in that portfolio. During conferences, you know exactly what to highlight as strengths and areas of progress and areas of challenge that they may need to work on. For parents, the parents can see tangible evidence of the progress that their children are making. You can, now, a point here is, if you do some reading, you will notice that there's something called a writing folder, right? And the writing folder is really every piece of writing that the students do collected into a folder. If you choose to do that, you know it's at its early stages. The students aren't voracious writers. They aren't, writing every day. They've begun writing, you're still building that up. You can use that as your portfolio. Every piece of writing that they do, they put in there, and then you decide in the end which ones you may use for giving feedback, for grading, etc. However, you can also have just a portfolio that includes only samples of the students' best work. Because really our aim is to help every student feel successful at the end of the day. You want every student, when they leave the class, they feel, I did something worthwhile today. I'm making some progress. And the portfolio can help them to see that. So what can the students include in their portfolio? What can you and the students include in the portfolio? Because of course it's organized, you want to have a table of contents, right? It would let anyone who picks up the portfolio know what items are in there, what pieces are in there. And ideally you would have different types of writing in there. Now, I know a while ago I mentioned prose pieces, but you can have visual pieces in there too. You can have graphic texts, you can have infographics, you can have labeled or captioned illustrations. All of these will count as writing. You just have to agree with your students on what kinds of pieces you want them to develop, right? One interesting point, you can have each of your students set a goal for writing for that period of time. They can think of, what it is I would like to do to improve writing. Maybe I just want to enjoy writing. Because I don't enjoy writing right now. So that could be a goal. I want to enjoy writing. It could be that they do write, but there are some areas where they may be having some challenges. So maybe for that student is, I want to improve in developing setting, being more descriptive in my creative writing pieces. Or they want to explore a new form of writing. They've been doing a lot of prose. They want to move over to maybe some graphic design, some graphic writing, graphic text maybe. Placing these goals in their portfolios will help the students to track their own progress too. It could be at particular periods of time, you can stop and say, how are you doing with your goal? And how is this helping you to accomplish the goal that you have set for yourself for writing? And of course, you can include things such as checklists and rubrics. Of course, that would depend on the areas that the students are working on. It could range from editing checklists, revision checklists, convention checklists, overall writing checklists. And because in our writing workshop, an important aspect is the reflection at the end, you can include a reflection sheet or a reflection guide. Some questions that the students can talk about when it's time to share at the end of the writing workshop. Okay, how's my time going? It's going. So let's talk just for a little bit about checklists and rubrics. I will tell you that you can just go online. I think Pinterest is a teacher's friend. So is Google. There are some places where you may find rubrics for sale, but I don't think we've gotten to the point where we need to pay monies just yet. I think there are so many available, right? So as you are using checklists and rubrics, here are 4 little points I want you to keep in mind. First, I want you to think of them as teaching tools. You want your rubrics and checklists to do at least a third of the teaching for you. Because as you've explained the points, those very same points will be in your rubric or your checklist. Once students have them, then they know what is expected as they write. This is why there must be point number 2, training for the teachers and for students. So teachers need to know when they either adopt or adapt a rubric, that they know what each item in the rubric is asking for and what is the evidence that this thing is present in the piece of writing. So vague statements are unacceptable in the rubric, right? You want students to be able to say, when I read this line, I know exactly what is expected. I can go in my piece of writing and I can find it, or I can notice that it's not there. So no vague statements and no overpacked statements either, that the student is demonstrating this and this. No, either they're capitalizing or they're not, and they're using commas or they're not, right? We don't want to pack it. We want, before we present the students with rubrics to use, that we've spent time doing exactly what we spend time doing on our own, going through that rubric and understanding every line and what it means. You have to create a rubric, and that's point number 4, but I'll jump there, that is suitable for the level and the needs of your students. So clearly, if you have a grade K class or a grade 1 class, you will not have a very packed rubric, very dense, text dense. You may have something that have a lot of images in it, right? Now, I don't know how well you can see this example here, this one, but I really like it because it has a little explanation checklist at the top, right? And then at the bottom is the actual assessment that the student will do. So the student has this little checklist to say, these are the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And then I assess my work to see if I've actually done it. And as opposed to the student in this section choosing just one, the student actually builds from activity to activity. So the student can eventually shade all 9 of the boxes, right? To say that they've done all of the things required. And these things were actually identified in the checklist. All right? Remember that your checklist or your rubric, well, a checklist specifically can be used for really small tasks, right? I think I saw one online for expanding sentences. Now just think of anything. Remember we spoke about explicit teaching? When you're teaching explicitly, you're giving the students the steps, you know, the process. You know that can go into a poster, right? Once it can go into a poster and it describes steps, it can go into a checklist. So if you've given students 3 things that you can do to expand your sentences, those 3 things become your checklist now. So as simple as expanding sentences. And it could be as a major task as assessing an entire piece of writing. So keep those things in mind. And I think we have some links in the chat with some examples of rubrics. But I also opened some pages, some Chrome pages, and I will share with you what some of them look like. They range from very simple to a little more complex. So look at this one. A checklist for revising informational writing. Organization. Do I have a topic sentence? Are my ideas in order? Do I use transitions? Do I have a conclusion? Now imagine that for that session, you're looking at organization or you're looking at only ideas. Do you have to have all of these at once? You can just take this one. And because for that session, all we're looking at is how to organize our writing, this could be our checklist for the day or for the 2 lessons that we may be looking at organization. When we're looking at ideas, and my ideas about my topic, Do I have some ease? Examples, explanations, events, experiences. Now, isn't that nice? Very easy. Do I need to add ideas? Do I need to take out some ideas? Very simple. Here's another. This is for, notice, grade K, right? And this is a checklist that can be used by the student to self-assess, by the student to peer assess, and by the teacher. Look at how simple this is for informative writing. It's written from left to right and top to bottom. Has spaces between words. Shows use of a word wall to spell sight words. So are the words on the word wall? Am I looking at the word wall to find out how to spell a sight word? I've used a capital letter for the word I. So simple. Spell words using letter sounds. So that's a phonetic spelling, not saying conventional spelling. Uses a capital letter for the first word in a sentence, uses correct punctuation. Notice what the focus is on. These are things that the students are learning at the grade K level, right? And the content, 2 items. Names a topic, shares a detail. Now, if we put all of this together, we do not expect conventional spelling, but we do expect to see an idea, a detail expressed in a sentence that begins with a capital letter. And if there's an I, it's also capitalized. If there are sight words, you already know it would be spelled correctly, but there'll also be phonetic spelling. At the grade 1 level, practically the same thing, but addition uses a period, question mark, or exclamation mark correctly. Why? Because these are the things that they're doing at the grade 1 level. Uses capital letters for dates and or names of people. That's what they're learning to do. Notice here just 3 items. Names a topic, shares details about a topic, includes a good ending. And as they go on to grade 2, now they add a little to the content, has at least 2 paragraphs. Grade 3 has at least 3 paragraphs, includes illustrations to help the reader, graphs, pictures, and charts, right? And this final one I wanted to share, it's a little more dense, so it may be good for older students, right? This is an editing checklist for self and peer assessment. So you self-assess on this side, you peer edit on this side, but notice over here, you can put in comments and suggestions for the peer, right? So I read my written piece aloud to see whether stop or pause for periods, where to stop or pause for periods, question marks, exclamation marks, and commas. I put a check here. I read the author's piece aloud to see where to stop, right? I did, but then I noticed maybe he missed a comma or 2. So I put in a little comment or suggestion here for the author, right? And notice punctuation, capital letters, grammar, spelling. Why? Because this is just an editing checklist. Okay? And these are online. You know, I didn't go and find anything fancy anywhere. I just went online and that's what I got. Okay, folks, so it's right there online for you as well. This rubric, I just shared this one because I wanted to show one of the ways you can really maximize your rubric and use it as a teaching tool. Use it, number 1, as a conferencing tool. So students know exactly what you're referring to. They're familiar with it. They know what you're referring to when you say whatever it is. One of the items in here, maybe you want to focus on. Okay, hold on, please. I think there's something up with my presentation. Let me just share again. Are we okay? Okay, perfect. Right, so using the rubric, the student will know that when you're referring to, because you're looking at argumentative writing, when you're talking about introducing claims and acknowledging and distinguishing the claim from alternate or opposing claims, they're not shocked and wondering, what are you talking about? You've already discussed this with them, so they know exactly what it is you're referring to. So you can use this as a conferencing tool, number one. You can use it as a tracking tool, because if you notice on this end, what does it say? With guidance and support from adults. So what level of guidance and support was given to the student before they wrote? And there's a nice list here. I really like that. So check off what has been done before the student wrote the piece being scored. So there was a discussion with the student, or there was a read aloud or shared reading, there was drawing, there was vocabulary bank work, shared or interactive writing, graphic organizer, language frames. You notice how differentiated this is? So depending on the student level and the student's ability, you see what the student, you see what supports you can provide to the student, right? You can also use this as a progress tool if it's completed repeatedly. So at the beginning of the writing, one of the first writing exercises, the student does this, but then later on in the school term or the school year, use this again, and you see what the differences are, how the student does. And of course, it's a great reporting tool. You can use this to report to parents how students have made progress over time in specific areas here highlighted in the rubric. All right, I think this is all of the time that we have, but I did want to find out from you an opportunity for you to share of the topics discussed there. We spoke about inclusive education, differentiated instruction, understanding by design or backward design. We spoke about portfolios, rubrics, checklists. Which ones are you familiar with, you've been using for a while, or which topic would you like to learn a little more about that you found really interesting throughout our discussion here? So here's an opportunity for you to share. Just raise your hand and you'll be able to unmute. Anything interesting, people, or was this just a practicing me talking? I'm very good at it, eh? So I didn't need any additional practice. But were there any topics or ideas that piqued your interest and you'd like to learn a little more about? If you're too shy to talk, you can use the chat as well. Okay, yes, Miss Alexis.
Good afternoon. Yes, I think in the previous session I mentioned UDL, but I'm going to mention it again. So when you spoke about giving the children choices, it just reminded me again about the features of UDL, specifically multiple means of engagement. So for example, like you stated, give the children choices, you should know what your students like, what they can do, so that every child does something at the end of the class. So that would be multiple means of engagement. And you also spoke about the end product, how we present the book to the students, which goes back to multiple means of representation. So as teachers, we need to be reminded of providing various means whereby our students can learn, because there are different learners in the classroom, visual, kinesthetic, different learners. And you also mentioned about students who may be visually impaired, who may need a different way of learning, who may need the information to be presented in a different way. So it just reminded me again about UDL and the importance of UDL and how effective UDL can be when we provide multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of expression.
Thank you, Miss Alexis. And that means for the rest of you, if you have no idea what we're talking about here, but you're interested, you know who to speak to. Just talk to Miss Alexis in the chat before the session ends, all right? Because she clearly has a lot that she can share with you about this particular approach. I see some people put in the chat that using the rubric as a teaching tool was interesting for them. Another person mentioned the rubrics and checklist and sharing those to encourage creative writing and backward design. Yes, people, you really should give backward design a real good read and a real good look. You can find summaries of it online. I think we gave you some links, but if you're really interested, I think this book is like maybe $20 on Amazon. I think I put the links for Amazon in there too, to the books. I think it's worth it. If you have a Kindle or a Kindle app, you just download a Kindle app, you can get a Kindle version which is usually about $15 or maybe even less, right? So they're really good reading material. I wish I could tell you everything that there is about backward design and how to go about doing it and how to implement it. But I really think it would be worth your while to explore it, try it out, and then give us some feedback on how it worked out, especially for your planning and how it helps shift your mind from teaching to student learning. Okay, thank you so much for your contributions in the chat. And of course, for those of you who shared orally. Our time is up. So next session, our final session, we will be talking about how to plan for writing. So how we can put all of this together and how we can take our curriculum standards and outcomes and how we can maybe even integrate content areas to improve student writing stamina, writing mastery, and so on. Okay? Thank you so much for attending, and I will see you tomorrow at 5 for our final session. Au revoir.